Good morning, you guys, or wherever it is, whatever time of day, afternoon, evening, when you're watching this. I am having a slow start today. I'm tired. We have been building the orchard since a week ago. We started last Saturday, so definitely pretty close to a week. We're burnt out of the orchard. We finally have all the holes dug. I haven't backfilled them yet, but it's nice to have all the holes dug. And so now I just have the 5 apple trees that's inside of my garden that I'm probably gonna stay there, as well as the elderberries and the bushes. I also was laying down landscape fabric in the garden. I'm tired of that. I'm just tired of outside work right now. And so today I am going to be doing some inside stuff that I need to get done. I had some chicken that I made chicken broth off of the bones, and a lot of it had fat, and so I want to, it's been sitting in the refrigerator, so I want to skim off some of the fat and then pressure can it. I do want to make some biscuits. I actually, let me turn you around. I had my sourdough sitting in the refrigerator for like a month, and I took it out 2 days ago. And it usually takes about 2 days worth of feedings to start bubbling back up. Yesterday I was gonna make sourdough, but it wasn't so bubbly. So today I am going to make sourdough sliced bread for the first time. I'm gonna try. I've never made sourdough sliced like sandwich bread. I've only made that one bread recipe that you guys see me make a lot of times. But since I have lots of starter and it's ready to be used, I'm going to try to make sourdough starter. You guys won't get to see that because I have to let it proof for like 12 hours, but I am going to start it right now. I'm going to use a recipe from Lisa on Farmhouse on Boone. I'll link it below if you're interested. I'm going to start with the sourdough since that takes the longest, and it's just going to be sitting there for all the hours. So I have 2.5 cups of water, and I'll need 2 tablespoons of honey. The recipe I'm using called for a cup of softened butter, but I didn't feel like softening butter, so I am going to use this ghee because it's already softened. Ghee is basically clarified butter, and it's really easy to make your own by stovetop or oven. I didn't make this, but I have made ghee in the past. This is just store-bought ghee that I put in this container. Then you need a teaspoon of salt. Oh my goodness! I can't believe I just did that. I'm gonna have to clean this up. So I basically just had to empty out I took out the ghee because it was still it was hard enough, and then emptied out the salt water. But I need 1 cup of sourdough starter. This is going to make 2 loaves, and I'm going to need 8 cups of flour. I'm not going to worry about feeding my sourdough starter at this moment, but I will feed it before the day is up. So I thought it would be fun to just answer some questions. I've gotten some new subscribers and people just wanting to know a little bit more about my backstory and about how we transitioned from a house to an RV back into a house. So we lived in a corner lot. I think it had 0.28 of an acre. I did not have chickens, even though we didn't have an HOA and I could have had chickens. We just had a fairly big size garden, maybe 1/4 of the size or 1/8 of the size that I have now. But we did know that we wanted to move somewhere where it had more acres, more space. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do like market style farming and sell my produce, but I did know that I wanted more space to have animals and to have more garden space. So after living in that house for 7 years, we sold it, and we used the money that we sold that house to buy our RV and our van to move the RV. We did not have any place to live, and so we stayed in a campground for about a week until we found our RV and our van to be able to move the RV. And the Lord was so gracious to us. We found it all in that same week, and we just stayed camping, and it was really fun while we waited to get our RV to live in permanently. While we did that, we did have all of our stuff in storage. Originally, we were selling our house so that we can just go straight to somewhere with land, but the house that we were looking at with land, I think it had 5 acres. It did not work out, and so that's how we ended up in the RV. We listed our house in August of 2019, so that was right before COVID, as the housing market was beginning to go up. So the sourdough is resting. It said 10 to 12 hours. This is the chicken broth that I have, and you can see that lots of them have that layer of fat. You don't want to can so much fat, and I am going to be canning these. I usually in the past would freeze my chicken broth. I need a spoon. But I'm bad about remembering to take stuff out of the freezer. So anyway, I'm just going to skim off this fat. And so I like having canned chicken broth, and we actually ran out. And I've been missing it because it's so much easier to just grab a can of broth when you need it, and you don't have to defrost it. So once I get the fat out and I'm adding it to this pot, I am going to use one jar to top off the rest of the jars, because you can see where the liquid has gone down. The broth has gone down. I'm going to refill it back up. So back to our RV story. We ended up living in our RV for a total of 2 years and 2 weeks. We sold our house in the end of September of 2019, and then we bought this house October 18th of 2021. So almost exactly 2 years we were in our RV. We spent 10 months of our RV living in a campground in Kentucky. Kentucky was absolutely beautiful. And then we spent the next 14 months in a campground in probably an hour away from the Charleston area. Once we got back to the Charleston area, we did take much longer than we expected to get a house. We looked at lots of properties. We got outbidded for some properties. The housing market was crazy because this was at the height of COVID, where everyone was selling their house and people didn't know what was happening. And so a lot of people were trying to homestead. And so we just had problems getting back into a house. To the point that when this house came on the market, I remember thinking, you know, if you didn't see a house that day that it came on the market, most likely you wouldn't get it. And I remember this house had been on the market for 2 days before we got to see it. And so by the time we got to see it, I was not hopeful that we would get this house, but we ended up getting this house. And so that was really happy ending. We did still take more than a month or two to close. I think we ended up taking about 4 months to close and finalize on this house. So by the time we got here, we were all super fed up with the process of moving back into a house, and definitely ready to be back in a house and to be on land, which is what we had always hoped for. The property that we are currently living on is 2.6 acres. So this was much smaller acres than we originally, when we first sold our house in 2019, and we're looking at acres. It was definitely looking at, you know, I said that I would be content with like 5 acres at that time, because I was thinking, you know, this is when, before COVID, and this is when we had saw even a property for 13 acres that was only like $60,000. And so we were definitely planning on getting a property that had lots and lots of acres. But then when COVID happened and everything doubled in price at that time, and then I would have took anything. I was like, as long as it has 1 acre, I would be, happy living in 1 acre, because at this time I had been watching homesteading videos and just learning all I could before we actually got into a homestead, that I felt confident that even if I had 1 acre, that I could do all of the things that I wanted to do. I knew that I couldn't have a cow, but I, thought that I could still have, chickens, I could still have the garden, I could still have fruit trees, I could still do all the things that I had a passion to do, it would just be on a smaller scale. One of the big things that I've always wanted to do, even with having a garden, is I've looked up so many of those charts where it's like grow enough food, you know, how it tells you how many plants to grow enough food for your family for a year. And that's always been one of my goals, is to be able to grow enough food, vegetables, to have enough food for a year. When we first moved here, me building the garden, I did it on a quick pace. I did it much quicker than I did in my old garden, using less materials than I did in my old garden. And so I did struggle with my soil way more than I did in my old garden. And but I did want to have these beds just built. And so now going forward, I'm so glad to have the garden all set up, and now just going forward is getting everything finalized. So getting the orchard in place, getting our greenhouse, so that next year we can have a much better successful garden. I would say that my homesteading experience is a little different than other people, because when at the same time as just moving here, springtime happened, and my son, who had played baseball before we left and moved, decided that he wanted to pick up baseball again. And so he did travel ball and he did school ball, and that took me away a lot of the times from being home and doing the homesteading things, because I had to drive. He wasn't driving at the time, and he still can't drive by himself. And so, bringing him to practices and picking him up and going to games and all that took me away from the homestead a lot this spring and summer. And so that was, I don't really know other homesteaders who have children in sports that they need to bring their kids back and forth. And so that's what I feel like one of the struggles that I did struggle with this past summer and spring, with gardening and harvesting and stuff like that. One of my goals this past spring and summer was I wanted to grow lots of flowers. And although I grew flowers, I didn't grow as many as I would have hoped and desired. I wanted to be able to build lots of bouquets, and that just didn't happen this past year. And so that's one of my goals next year, is to be able to still have a pretty good sized vegetable garden, but also still be able to grow lots of flowers and make bouquets. I'm hoping that going forward and having better soil going into next year, because I am using our rabbit manure, I am, adding soil. I have added fertilizers. I have added, food scraps and all these other things, trying to fix the soil for next year, to prepare to have a better season gardening. And I think it's working. I mean, my fall garden, as you saw if you watched my garden harvest or tour video, my brassicas, broccolis, and cabbages seem to be doing really good. And I also had good success having a second round of tomatoes, a second round of green beans. And so I definitely think, just going forward into next season, that I will have a better gardening year, when I'm not focused on building the garden and as well as trying to plant stuff and harvest stuff, because this past year I was still trying to get the garden all set up, and still trying to garden in it as I'm trying to get it set up to where it is now. I think after laying down the landscape fabric and filling the metal beds that I already have, the garden would be pretty complete. And so I would have everything just waiting until next year. And so I'm pretty confident that going forward I would have less things going on, as far as trying to keep up with adding more beds, adding more soil, planting stuff, harvesting stuff. And now I can just kind of maintain it, if that makes sense. Even building the orchard area took way longer than I was expecting. I was thinking we would put up the gate in one day, we would bring the trees over in, a day, and get them all dug and planted. And like I said, I'm burnt out from doing the orchard, even though I'm so excited and so happy to finally getting it done. But it definitely took longer than I was expecting. But I'm so grateful to be getting it done, and to have the finances and materials and the capability to have it all fenced in and have the area done, as well as, you know, the cooler weather, and not having to worry about that if I'm building this orchard area, then I'm neglecting my garden, because the garden, I do have a much smaller fall garden than I did in the summer. So I hope you guys, you know, like this type of video. Thank you for hanging out with me as I was just in the kitchen this morning, doing things and not spending time out in the garden, just trying to regroup and recuperate from all the hard work we've been doing out in the orchard and in the garden with laying down landscape fabric. Our backs were definitely hurting from crawling on the ground trying to get those landscape fabric staples into the ground. And so I really appreciate you guys. If you guys made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time.